We need to get uncomfortable, do some challenging things that God is telling us to do that maybe we have not been willing to step into before. And how do we follow that path? The first thing is self and our own comfort has got to be put to the side. Hello, and welcome once again to the podcast, episode 95 of the Audacious Faith Podcast. And Happy New Year. We're about to approach a new year, and it's going to be exciting, but that's only going to be the case if it's also a new you. Is there going to be an improved version of you? Are you going to actually move forward in your walk with God? Or maybe as you're listening to this, you don't even have a walk with God yet, and you're just kind of still checking it out. And that's okay. That's okay. But whatever you do, let's move forward in that journey. Today, as we enter into the year 2024, I have a catchy title for you, and it is 4 for 24, all right? 4 for 24. 4 things that you should focus on in the year 2024, which will improve your current living and also improve your current walk of faith. So are you ready for this? You want to take some notes? You want to take it down? Here you go. Number 1 of the 4 for 24. Let's get hungry and thirsty. The Bible tells us in Matthew chapter 5 in the Beatitudes, and I like to call that the Beatitude attitude, that we should hunger and thirst for righteousness. Jesus said that. He said the person who hungers and thirsts for righteousness is going to be blessed. And not only are they going to be blessed, which means they're going to find God's favor in life, but they're going to be filled. That's the great thing about it. It's one thing to be hungry and not be able to satisfy that hunger. It's one thing to be thirsty and not to be able to satisfy that thirst. But God tells us that when we come and we hunger after His truth, we hunger after His word, we thirst after it, we hunger and we thirst after becoming more right, more correct, more accurate, living a better way in our life, that He'll actually come through and He'll help us to be filled. We won't remain hungry like that. We won't remain thirsty. He's got it. So how are you going to do this? You're going to need to be praying to Him every day. You're going to need to be going to the Word to Him every day. You're going to be having to go, not in a casual way like maybe you've done before, where maybe it's just like a little 5-10 minute thing, but really look at it, really search at it, really observe it, really ask Him, what is it that you're looking at? Say, God, help me to see things that I've never seen before. Help me to see things about myself. Help me to understand why I do what I do, why I react the way I do, why I say the things that I say, why I feel the way that I feel in certain situations, how I can improve that, how I can change some of the habits that I'm struggling with in my life. Help me to hunger and thirst after righteousness. Now, you and I know what hunger and thirsting really is, right? It's one thing to say I'm hungry just because I haven't eaten in 2 hours and I just feel like eating. But it's another thing when your stomach is growling and now you're starting to feel a little bit lightheaded and it's been a while, maybe it's been all day, or maybe you've gone on a fast before where really you didn't even eat for 1, 2, 3, 4 days. I remember a time just a few years ago where I did a fast where all I had was water for 5 days. And then it came up, I made this mistake. It came up upon a Sunday and we were having this big, huge meal at church. And that's how I broke the fast. And wow, I was so hungry that I first started getting that stuff. And I started eating the turkey and the mashed potatoes and the salad and the cranberry sauce and everything else that went in. And that lasted really good for about the first 10 minutes when all of a sudden, bam, it just hit me and floored me. All right. But the great thing about when we do this with God and when we do this in an act of faith is we'll be filled and we won't be sick. We'll be actually satisfied and get what we need. So that's the first one in your 4 for 24. Let's get a hunger. And I would submit to you that we haven't been as hungry as we need to be. I was interviewing in one of the earlier episodes with Isabella McMillan. You can look that one up. And where she's talking about growing up in Romania and how you weren't allowed to read the Bible there and you weren't allowed to go to church and you could actually lose your life for that. And how her and her brother when they were alone in their little one-room home and their parents were gone, they actually noticed that the floorboards were a little bit loose, and underneath there was a Bible. And they had never seen a Bible before. And so they started from Genesis and all the way through, and they started to read the stories of what had happened in the Bible, and they were fascinated by this, okay? And when they got home, how their parents actually said, oh, don't ever look at this again. But she found out later in life that it actually belonged to the parents. They just didn't want them to get hurt. And so the parents were hiding it, and they were reading it. That's what we call a true hunger, where your life could actually be on the line. You know, we take things so casually because we have a Bible in our home. We may have several copies. We have Bible app on our phone where we can read it in a whole bunch of different versions and translations. We could even have it read to us. We could have in different languages, you name it. And we get so casual with it. But the reality is, what if you couldn't have it? We need to approach it in that way, a hunger and thirst where I've just got to have it. I've got to have more of it. I've got to take this in because I want to be right. I want to change. Do you want to change in 2024? That's step one. The second one is to do a cleanse. All right. In the Old Testament, we find in the book of Exodus, we find the time of the Passover. And at the Passover, what was going to happen was they were supposed to put the blood around the doorpost. And when the angel of death came and saw that, they would pass over and not take the firstborn son. The Jewish people still celebrate Passover yearly to this day. But as they prepared for that, there was something else that they were supposed to do. And that was a thorough cleansing of where they were living. They had to go through, they had to sweep out everything. They had to get everything clean. They had from top to bottom, every cabinet, every floorboard, every crevice, every corner. Okay, they had to make sure that it was completely clean. All right. We need to do that for the year 2024. It's great to get the word in there, but the problem is if we still allow junk to remain, it's going to just mess everything up. We've got to do a cleanse. The Bible tells us in Psalm 139 that the prayer towards the end of that psalm, Lord, search me and know my heart. Try me and see if there's any wicked way in me and lead me in the everlasting way. We need to ask God to take like a big, huge magnifying microscope glass and just put it on our life and illuminate to us everything that needs to be cleansed out. All right. One of the things in the Passover that they were looking for was any manna or anything that was left in there, and because it had to go there, and any leaven, and it had to be gone. And in the New Testament, we see that the Bible tells us that a little leaven leaveneth the whole loaf. It's like when you're at home and you've got like a loaf of bread and you see just a little bit of mold on there. If you don't get rid of that, pretty soon it completely spreads. All right. And very, very quickly. All right. You may be trying to follow after God, and yet you still tell the dirty jokes. You still read the things you shouldn't. You still use language and words that you shouldn't say. And you make exceptions in your life and you say that these things are okay. But what it does is it starts to affect and continues to affect everything else. If you want to take things up to a higher level in the year of 2024, then you got to get with God and have those things completely cleaned out. Do not leave anything to chance, and so that it can grow like a cancer and everything else. Now, the third one in our 4 for 24, very important. You got to get uncomfortable, right? You say, well, I'm already uncomfortable. Well, you may be comfortable in your discomfort. All right. We've talked about this in some previous episodes in the past. You got to get uncomfortable. All right. I know that's not necessarily the goal that most of us have, but Jesus said himself, he said, if anyone would to come after me, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. We got to get uncomfortable. All right. The typical default is that I'm going to focus on self and making myself as comfortable as possible, as peaceful as possible, having everything there. And that's what we usually determine is a good life. But in 4 for 24, in really following after an audacious faith, we need to be stretched. We need to get uncomfortable. All right. We need to get it out of that comfort zone and do some challenging things that God is telling us to do that maybe we have not been willing to step into before. And how do we follow that path? The first thing is self and our own comfort has got to be put to the side. All right. We may need to take up our cross, just like Jesus was willing to pay the ultimate price and go and be obedient even unto the death of the cross. He won't necessarily call us to that extreme. But what is it that he's telling us that we need to do, even if it sacrifices our own comfort and convenience? And how do we know what to do when it comes to that? The last part of that verse where he says, follow me. Are you willing in the year of 2024 to follow whatever God is calling you to do? Even if it seems hard, even if it seems challenging, even if it seems scary, even if it completely takes you out of your comfort zone, are you willing to take that audacious step of faith and move forward, even if you don't know how you're going to do it, but because God is telling you to do it? Are you willing to move in that direction? And then that brings us to the last one when it comes to the 4 for 24. Number 1, let me review again. Get hungry and get thirsty. Number 2, do a thorough cleanse, including avoiding all the appearance of evil. Number 3, you got to get uncomfortable, deny self, take up your cross, follow him. And then the last one is the result of what is going to happen if you follow those first 3. And that is that you're not even going to recognize yourself at the end of 2024. You're going to be much further along. You're going to be a changed person. You're going to be a new and improved version of you. It is not okay. It is not okay in December of 2024 to take a look at you and how you're living and what you're doing and where you're at and say, wow, there's nothing different than December of 2023. That is just not okay. The Bible tells us that God said himself that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it in you. He's going to be faithful on his part. The question is, are we being faithful on our part? In 1 Corinthians chapter 4, it tells us that this is required of stewards. And as we've discussed in the past, you and I are stewards. The life we have, the days we're given, the opportunities, the talents, the resources, everything that we have in our possession, everything is steward. It's all entrusted to us that we're supposed to use it in a way that God would desire and that he would be honored by, right? And so it says, it is required of stewards more than anything else that one be found faithful. It's not required that you're the most talented. It's not required that you're the richest. It's not required that you're the most eloquent. It's not required that you're the most perfect. What's required is that you're found faithful. And as you do this, and as you follow after him, he will be faithful to complete in you the work that he began, the work that he's continuing, and that he'll, Lord willing, if you live past it, will continue to do past the year of 2024. But 2024 is a part of that journey that we're supposed to grow and we're supposed to change and become more like Jesus, more Christ-like, more godly, and more audacious in our faith. So I hope you took these down. And let me just remind you of one thing. It's great to hear it. It's great to know it. But we got to do it. Well, we take those steps today to actually start along this journey. All the great plans that people write down for the new year and the goals and the resolutions and all that, you know why most of them never go anywhere, right? Because that's all it is. I resolve I'm going to do this. I may write it down, and then they don't do anything to change anything. They don't take any action. This requires a massive, purposeful action on our part to actually do it, not just talk about it. All right? So you can review this, go back through if you didn't take those notes, and purpose in your heart to actually, along with God, make those changes. And one of the things you can do for me right now as we end is, if you've heard in the past me asking you to subscribe to this podcast and you've yet to do it, can you click on that subscribe button right now and subscribe to the podcast so that you will not miss a single episode? And also, can you do me a favor and share this episode as well as other great episodes with your friends and family so that they can hear it as well? And you can also reach out to us at any time at jgottharesenior@gmail.com, also jgottharesenior on Facebook or Instagram, or the Audacious Faith Podcast on Instagram also. God bless you, and we hope to have you join us for many other episodes as well as we launch into an exciting 2024 where God's going to take us many places, and we're going to interview and talk with many great people. So we will see you next time. Take care.